Hola a todos, bienvenidos a un nuevo video, espero que estén muy bien. Esta publicación es de suma importancia. Estamos hablando de una periodista que estaba en los medios de comunicación principales y decidió salirse de allí para dar declaraciones fuertes sobre donde estaba trabajando antes. El nombre de esta periodista es Kim Iversen, quien tenía un programa llamado The Hill. Afirma que realmente hay un discurso oculto que está dirigido por grandes poderes, los cuales dictaminan qué es lo que se debería pronunciar frente al público y qué otras cosas no se deberían decir, lo cual aparentemente confirmaría lo que muchos llevan pensando hace rato, que dirían, bueno, esto no es nada nuevo. Sin embargo, salió en un programa a declarar que nos espera una época cual nunca la habíamos visto. Es decir, muy similar a la Edad Media o básicamente la Edad Feudal, donde era inalcanzable llegar al nivel de los reyes, de los monarcas, etc. Así como lo oyen. Ella dio estas declaraciones, se supone que se basó en sus investigaciones para hacer eso, antes de mostrarles la traducción para que saquen sus propias conclusiones. Les voy a explicar primero el programa al cual se presentó de la ex celebridad Russell Brand o celebridad Russell Brand, y segundo, por qué a ella la sacaron de los medios de comunicación, y tercero, podrán ir y ver la traducción. Aquí les dejaré las marquillas de tiempo para que vayan a donde les interese. Primero, el programa de Russell Brand es esta celebridad que tiene un podcast, el cual es uno de los más grandes del mundo. Algunos los llaman una disidencia controlada, es decir, que este hombre estaría supuestamente dando opiniones en las cuales él finge ser nuestro aliado, pero en realidad no lo sería. Pero amigos, aquí yo quiero que trasciendan un poco más allá y se den cuenta de que hay que ponerle cuidado al mensaje y no al mensajero. Y esto es porque el hecho de que me caiga mal alguien, pero este que me cae mal dice que el cielo es azul, eso no va a cambiar que eso sea una verdad lo que este hombre esté diciendo. Así que retengan lo bueno, desechen lo malo, lo que no les guste, y los invito a que hagan un proceso de reflexión. Sé que sí, él se tomó una foto con Yuval Noah Harari, que él dijo lo de los robots, que somos animales hackeables, etcétera, yo lo sé, pero aquí es más trascendente el mensaje, como les digo yo. Así que les voy a explicar por qué la periodista Kim Iversen decidió ir a ese programa. Iba a entrevistar a este doctor Anthony, ya saben de qué estoy hablando, sobre el tema de las dosis. Ella no es anti esto, yo tampoco lo soy, pero tenía unas preguntas muy concretas sobre datos, estadísticas, porque básicamente respeta la libertad de que una persona elija o no hacer algo con los medicamentos. Pues no la dejaron hacer este tipo de entrevista y la sacaron de allí. Le dijeron que no podría incorporarse más al programa de Hill, que era donde se suponía que debía entrevistar a este doctor. Así que a partir de allí ella decidió salir y declarar todo esto. Y es muy importante que vean todas las declaraciones que dio para que saquen sus propias conclusiones. Así que vean.
I had a fantastic conversation with Kim Iversen, and she educated me brilliantly on the way that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation spend money in a variety of ways to create, in a sense, a kind of dome or a sphere of unquestionable influence. If they're paying for studies at prestigious places like Johns Hopkins, sometimes all you see is the brand name without thinking about where the money's come from. And as we've been taught, always follow the money. Is the reason that the mainstream media's reporting on particular incidents is so biased and so imbalanced because the funding is being funneled from one direction only.
You know, they're already set up and they kind of have a little bit more of a better understanding of how to implement this. I mean, certainly we saw a massive transfer of wealth, and I think that was obvious. You know, it was certainly obvious to me that that would happen, that when you shut down a society and you tell the economy that it has to close down, and a lot of people thought the economy was Wall Street. So then you wouldn't have that option. And that's kind of where it looks like we're headed, where the very few control everything. And we're seeing that even with housing being bought up by large companies like BlackRock. You know, we're just seeing a lot of our daily lives being controlled, increasingly being controlled by these large corporations. And so we're kind of moving into this really consolidated almost back in the time of monarchies. I mean, it feels like that, right? When you go back to those times when it was like the king owned everything, all the land you just rented from the king, and the king gave you your job. Your job in the little village was directed by whatever the king needed you to do. And it's just like, I feel like we're moving more into that direction again. They've just kind of redefined how monarchies work. And instead it's going to be these tech giants really running the show.
Yes, it feels like we're sometimes witnessing the emergence of a neo-feudalism, a new set of hierarchical structures where the state's ability to regulate and the ability of private corporations to control data, once you have the introduction of identifiers of that nature, you could see it's pretty easy to imagine how that would evolve into social credit scoring.
These organizations are funded by somebody. Somewhere they're getting their money. Where are they getting their money? And when we started looking into that, we started to see, well, a lot of the money disproportionately comes from Bill Gates, but we're also seeing that happening in all of these other organizations that we rely on for this clinical research. And so that exposure, I think, of the big money interests and the influence it has on these organizations and their reliance on these funds. And then because they're reliant on the funds, they don't want to go against the agenda of whoever it is that's funding them. And that's common sense, I think, for many of us to understand that relationship. We just didn't really know it was happening so much in the realm of our scientific institutions. That was something I think that was really shocking to many of us. And then media on top of that also being then funded heavily with commercial advertising and sponsorship are then funding the media. And so there's this it's this club really, and they're together and they're funded, and they all have the same motivation, and it's money. For them, it's more about how much money can we make off of a product. And so I think, we're seeing this, and because the media is unfortunately involved in that as well, because the media relies so heavily on sponsorship money and commercial dollars, who can we trust? Who's really telling us the right information, giving us the right information? You have to, when a person has to see a study so they watch the news says, well, this recent study came out from Johns Hopkins. And then you have to look at the study. Who funded the study? Yes, it was Johns Hopkins researchers that maybe did the study. And I'm just using them as an example. I'm not picking on them, but there's many other organizations that operate exactly the same way. Most of them do. And then you have to look at, okay, who funded this particular study? I mean, the average person isn't going to go through this to find out where's the money, follow the money. All of it is very broken. It's very bought off. And our media as well. And so, the shifting narratives, especially with the media, I just think they couldn't ignore certain things for a while. I mean, they tried, they silenced, they said, well, we're not going to even entertain that conspiracy theory. But it seems like they're trying to control the full narrative by ultimately trying to consolidate the world into one global run. It's much easier, especially in the digital age, if you can get everything run under the same government or the same group of people.
Y bueno, amigos, esto ha sido todo por el momento. Recuerden comentar abajo qué tema les gustaría que yo tratara, o si quieren que traiga más programas de Russell Brand. Ya he traducido varios fragmentos. Es un resumen, no es todo, pero bueno, amigos, ahí está lo más importante. También no olviden ver mis videos aquí, que no han sido demasiado recomendados por la plataforma. Compartan para que llegue más al algoritmo. Y recuerden que estamos conectados y nos vemos hasta la próxima.